I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Señor Presidente.
President, the government of Cuba last February 26th issued a statement on the events in Ukraine, expressing clearly its position for a solution which will guarantee the safety and sovereignty of all concerned and that will respond to legitimate humanitarian concerns. Cuba is a country that defends international law. It is committed to the Charter of the United Nations. Cuba will always defend peace and unambiguously respond to the threat or use of force against any state. For this reason, we firmly support the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace, signed by heads of state in Havana for our region in 2014. Cuba is also committed to international humanitarian law, and it calls on all parties to protect the population, their goods, and civilian infrastructure. We deeply deplore the losses of life of innocent civilians in Ukraine. The Cuban people has had and continues to have a close relationship with the people of Ukraine. President, it is not possible to rigorously and honestly analyze the current situation in Ukraine without carefully considering the factors that have led to the use of force and the non-observance of legal principles and international standards. Cuba fully supports these principles, which it upholds, and considers that they are an indispensable reference, particularly for small countries against hegemony, the abuse of power, and injustice. The United States' determination to continue the progressive expansion of NATO towards the borders of the Russian Federation have led to a scenario with unpredictable scope, but which could nevertheless have been avoided. The military movements made by the United States and NATO in recent months are well known in their movement towards regions adjacent to the Russian Federation, preceded by the delivery of modern weapons to Ukraine, which is the equivalent of a military pincer movement. It was a mistake to ignore the Russian Federation's demands for security guarantees, and it was a mistake to suppose that it would remain inactive in the face of a threat to its national security. It is not possible to achieve peace by surrounding and closing in on states. The responsibility falls to the government of the United States because of its doctrine of an increasingly offensive military policy outside the borders of NATO, which threatens international peace, stability, and security. Our concerns are heightened by the recent decision of NATO to activate for the first time the response force of that military alliance. Cuba rejects the hypocrisy and double standard of these actions. It must be recognized that the United States and NATO in 1999 launched a broad-scale aggression against Yugoslavia, a European country which they broke up at a high cost of lives for their geopolitical purposes whilst ignoring the Charter of the United Nations. The United States and allies have used force on multiple occasions, invading sovereign states to trigger regime change and interfering in the internal affairs of other nations that do not bow to their interests of domination and who defend their territorial integrity and independence. They are also responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians, which they describe as collateral damage. Millions of displaced people and vast destruction across the face of our planet as a result of their wars of pillage and plunder. President, the draft resolution on the situation in Ukraine, which was not approved in the Security Council last February 25th, was not designed as a real search for solutions to the current crisis. The text submitted to the General Assembly today suffers from the same deficiencies and lack of balance. It does not take into account the legitimate concerns of all parties concerned, nor does it acknowledge the responsibility of those who took aggressive actions which precipitated the escalation of this conflict. President, we welcome the opening of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Dialogue and negotiations, not war, are the only way to resolve this conflict. Cuba will continue advocating a diplomatic solution which is serious, constructive, and realistic for the current crisis in Europe through peaceful means that will guarantee the freedom and sovereignty of all, as well as peace, stability, and regional and international stability. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba.